Jojos Bizarre Adventure, I think, is received one of two ways. People either completely buy into the utter absurdity that is the concept of following the lineage of superpowered, super macho, superhero, super dudes that become arguably more super, less macho, but irrefutably even more awesome. Or you just don't like it, which is objectively wrong. Jojo's Bizarre Adventure was created and developed by Hirohiko Araki, beginning serialization in Shonen Jump in 1987 before moving to its sister magazine, Ultra Jump, in 2005. The series itself went on to gain international appeal, going on to have over 100 million volumes in print as of 2016 and inspiring a fan base of objectively cool dudes and dudesses in Japan and abroad who cosplay and parody Araki's work in their own.
Holy shit, there are so many JoJo references!
The series begins by following the life and misadventures of one innocent and earnest good boy, Jonathan Joestar, and Satan's literal spawn, Dio Brando. Despite being adoptive brothers, their clash of conflicting worldviews and methodology in the attainment of power through either blood-sucking vampirism or the breathing technique known as Haman, or Hamon, or Hammon. Dad, I'm sorry if you're watching this. I know none of this makes any sense. Lays the groundwork for a series that unabashedly leans into the bizarre, weird, and supernatural. By the time part 2 rolls around, we're dealing with supernatural deities named the Pillarmen who become nigh invincible to anything other than submission to entropy in the cool, expansive abyss that is the universe. Thanks, Joseph. And by part 3, we're introduced to stands, manifestations of one's life energy that gifts you with powers and abilities unique to the individual, be they good, bad, or somewhere in between. Part of the beauty behind such a system of powers is that the abilities don't necessitate any hard rules or logic. Sometimes, big men produce bigger men who punch really hard, and other times they take the form of more abstract concepts, like a fishing pole. Yeah, a fishing pole. Go and confirm for part 6. The creativity that stems from a power system like this ultimately is what I think gives the show its edge within the anime fandom, along with something that all JoJo characters have in immense quality. Swagger. Araki draws some incredibly beautiful and nuanced art. This is visible both in his manga panels and in the anime adaptation produced by David Productions. Characters introduced here ooze individualism and express themselves in all manner of ways that are distinctly memorable and instantly recognizable. It's a truly unique blend of storytelling, concept, and character design that is unlike anything seen in manga or anime before or after, and is why, despite its weirdness, is what makes it so easily adaptable into something like high fashion, where the models and experimental clothing design looks like they could have been born from a part 5 manga panel. This series is something unique, and to many people I think it represents escapism into the absurd and provides an outlet to experiment with concepts and motifs that no other medium or other manga can really quite tap into. And that's why, when Netflix began promoting this show, my heart skipped a beat. Oh great, it's a new JoJo anime! I can't wait to... Wait... That's... Rohan. Where's my JoJos? No, this can't be. This is a lie, a farce. How can you have a JoJo anime without anyone from the JoJo? Oh, there's one! This new series, called Thus Spoke Kishibe Rohan, isn't actually a new series at all. It's a collection of OVAs that began release back in 2017 as part of a Blu-ray bundle for the JoJo's Part 4 Diamond is Unbreakable box set. Essentially, if you bought the Blu-ray of the series, you'd receive the first in a series of 4 special OVAs. The OVAs themselves are based off of a variety of manga one-shots, manga short stories that were released across Shonen Jump and written by Araki himself. The one-shots were originally set up to be an all-new series by Araki, but having at the time been so infatuated with the character of Kishibe Rohan, he decided the character would take the mantle and star in a new series of shorts that explored his own bizarre adventures separate from the main JoJo canon. So, who is Rohan? For those of you who don't know, or may be using the series as a litmus test to gauge their interest in all of JoJo's, Rohan is an in-universe mangaka who uses real-life experience as inspiration for his material. He is hot-headed, he's supremely full of himself, and he may or may not serve as a self-insert for the writer, who has gone on record denying that, but I mean, he literally drew himself hugging his own characters, so Rohan is introduced in the series in part 4 as a secondary antagonist turned ally in episode 14, where we're introduced to his self-serving personality and, more importantly, his stand, Heaven's Door. Heaven's Door allows Rohan to literally read someone like a book, even granting him the ability to steal memories from that person and rewrite parts of their personality or memory. It's kind of OP. He uses this ability to read Koichi, this is Koichi by the way, memory, and learns about Koichi's life up to this point, and that Koichi, Josuke, this is Josuke by the way, along with other people in town have stands and abilities just like him. Inspired by Koichi's colorful life, Rohan steals his memory and uses them for inspiration for his manga. The thing is, stealing people's memories isn't cool, and he's eventually punished for it.
I win.
Learning that his own personal experiences, rather than ripping off someone else's experiences, would ultimately make for the best stories and draw out the most inspiration. Which finally brings us to Thus Spoke Kishibe Rohan. This horror anthology of stories all take place after the murder mystery of Part 4 is resolved and before the events of Part 5 begin. In this span of time, Rohan gets busy. He travels the world and across Japan in search of odd and haunting tales that will give him the motivation and inspiration to continue his manga, learning from the previous lesson that inspiration is best gleaned in person. Each story, with the exception of the final one, begins with Rohan meeting with people outside of a cafe or restaurant in Morio. These meetings are fairly innocuous. Meeting with Koichi about learning Italian, his editor learning that Rohan is broke, and another editor inviting him on a trip to a rural town to buy a home. All of these meetings appear routine and mundane on the surface, especially after the drama that ensued in Part 4. But while this may not be Jojo's Bizarre Adventure, it is Rohan's Bizarre Adventure. And that means things are about to fall apart very quickly. You see, while Jojo's Bizarre Adventure may be bizarre and weird and leans into some really silly ideas, the adventures that Rohan gets into are even more harrowing, as the focus this time around is on creating a sense of dread and terror that the mainline content approaches but never fully commits to. In these tales, Rohan serves as the narrator and protagonist. He sets the tales up as one would sitting around a campfire, diving into their lore and explaining the characters as if it were a fable or a warped fairy tale, like something from the Brothers Grimm or other dark collection of stories, before later sharing the part where he takes an active role in the story. As a result, much of what we hear from Rohan is hearsay, whether that be from a man on the run in the confessional or from an odd child tucked away in a millionaire's paradise. We're being given secondhand knowledge after the fact as researched by Rohan, lending to a kind of uncertainty and unease as the story progresses, particularly in the stories that Rohan has less of a role in. How much of what we're hearing is fact, and how much of it is fiction? How much of it does Rohan really believe? Probably all of it, since that's the kind of person that Rohan is. So let's take a look at one of these episodes, and the one I want to focus on is called Mutsukabe Hill. This is a spoiler warning, if you will. I'm going to basically talk about this entire episode, so if you don't want spoilers or for me to walk through the episode and explain parts about it, probably a good time to skip. I'll put the time code in here you can jump to. Anyway, let's get into it. So, in this episode, Rohan begins by asking his editor for an advance in lieu of the next one-shot he's producing for his editor's magazine. You see, Rohan is broke and currently staying with Koichi until he gets back on his feet. His editor, confused and wary of such a strange request, asks Rohan for more information on what happened and how such an accomplished mangaka could so quickly hit rock bottom. In typical Rohan fashion, it was all in pursuit of inspiration, in search of the next bizarre adventure, and in his madness and single-minded pursuit to fuel his inexhaustible creative flame, it was all to find the mysterious and ominous yokai, the Mutsukabe Zaka. Oh, and he bought 6 mountains in the middle of nowhere to prevent a road from being built in the area, just on the off chance that the construction may possibly scare off the yokai and prevent Rohan from maybe possibly finding the creature that may or may not exist, even though I'm pretty sure roads already exist in the area and the creature can... Yeah... It's a bit silly. In the case of this specific story, we learn of a soon-to-be college graduate named Naoko, who is heir to a wealthy family of miso paste makers, who is spending an afternoon playing games and hanging out with her boyfriend, Gunpei. Gunpei is the family gardener, and the relationship has been hush-hush for a while now, as Naoko is to be married off after graduating later this year to Shuichi at her father's request. By chance, this very same afternoon, Shuichi and Naoko's father stop by the family's home while Gunpei and Naoko are together, and in sudden and probably rash decision-making, Naoko decides to break up with Gunpei on the spot and asks him to leave the house as quickly as possible. Gunpei, wanting nothing more than to stay with his dearly beloved mistress of miso, protests, and in the altercation that follows, Gunpei trips and falls silent. Naoko, desperate to resolve this fight as soon as possible, appeals to Gunpei, fully explaining the situation. However, Gunpei doesn't respond. In fact, Gunpei doesn't even react. In her confusion, she rushes to Gunpei's side and, to her abject horror, finds that a golf club has pierced the back of his head, killing him instantly. The grisly scene intensifies as reality quickly sets in, and Naoko realizes that this looks like no accident. It looks as if she was the one to kill Gunpei, and if she doesn't do something about it quickly, her relationship with Gunpei and his murder will become known to the two people she desperately wants to keep in the dark. As she miserably tries to clean and hide the body, crawling and pulling her lifeless lover across the floor, something happens. Something truly terrifying. In pure Twilight Zone levels of otherworldly horror, she discovers that Gunpei's body is continuing to bleed. No heartbeat, no pulse, just a steady stream of blood that seemingly dries out the corpse until nothing but a husk of dried skin and bone remains. And yet, despite her best efforts, the corpse still bleeds. Watching Naoko panic-stricken and slowly deteriorating into hysterical madness as her fiancé's arrival draws ever closer has to be one of the most turbulent and desperate sequences of grotesque body horror, gore, and suspense horror that I've seen in fiction, and I've watched a lot of horror movies. This 6-minute plus scene could seemingly not have stopped any sooner for me, as watching it was physically painful, and yet at the same time, the haunting plight of Naoko was hard to turn away from. In the end, Naoko's fiancé enters the house and finds that everything is seemingly normal. No blood, no mess, and Naoko is calm. She reassures him that everything is fine, and he replies that he'll go catch up with the father. However, unbeknownst to the fiancé, Gunpei's corpse is wrapped up above Naoko, and Naoko, in a desperate attempt to keep this a secret, is swallowing Gunpei's blood, pleading in her mind for Gunpei's forgiveness and for him to please just stop. Wow, that was heavy, and I for one am happy that the story ends there. Oh, except it's not over yet! Naoko marries Shuichi but never strays far from the house. Every day, she climbs to the attic, and tucked away up there, silently bleeding into the dark, lies Gunpei's destroyed, disgusting, damaged body, who Naoko now cares for. Eventually finding that in the years following, that if water should be sprayed on the corpse, his body returns to normal. Rohan learns all this in a chance meeting with Naoko when he, for some reason, decides to read her memories while out investigating. Upon learning of Gunpei, his insatiable curiosity takes over, and he starts for the family home to uncover just what Gunpei might actually be. That is, until he meets a young girl who recognizes him, and as she goes to turn away from him, falls and lands on a rock, killing her instantly, and begins to bleed endlessly and profusely. Recognizing the similarity between this and Gunpei from Naoko's story, Rohan uses Heaven's Door to erase her memories of him and for her to be unable to see him. In that moment, not a second too early, the yokai that Rohan came to investigate appears before him, shouting and cursing at Rohan. Though now invisible to the creature and the girl, Rohan remains immune to the demon's spell, and the girl quickly recovers, having failed to die in front of Rohan and unsuccessful in passing on the curse, goes on to the family home, calling out to her mother, Naoko. Rohan realizes that this must be the child of Naoko and Gunpei, and rationalizes that this yokai must die in front of people as a means of attaching itself to a person, and either through the curse or restoring the body through water, reproduces with its victim. Rohan inexplicably didn't learn this fact from reading Naoko's memory, which was baffling and serves as a twist to the story that not even Rohan could have seen coming, but I think lends to the mystery of what these creatures living in the remote mountains of Japan may truly be. He rationalizes that the family, in their own twisted way, seemed happy and decides to leave them be. What makes this series of 4 episodes so unique, other than the reasons just touched upon, is that anime as a genre, while known for a lot of things, is not known for producing great horror stories. Googling a list of the best horror or scariest horror anime will more often than not bring up series like Dead Man Wonderland, Death Note, Tokyo Ghoul, The Promised Neverland, and others like it, all of which are fine shows in their own right, but incorporate horror elements into their narrative as opposed to being strictly horror themselves, and instead plays into more typical shonen tropes with elements of horror thrown in to spice up the dish, if you will. Jojo's creator Araki said in an interview that the Rohan one-shots were to be inspired by Western shows like The Twilight Zone and Twin Peaks, which I think describes why the tone and oppressive atmosphere of Rohan's stories feel and present themselves with such a unique flair and charisma. In watching these episodes, it's easy to see that the choices in structure, setup, and design of places and characters were all very deliberate and ultimately effective. Hell, even the opening title is different in tone, color palette, and musical direction when compared to openings from the same series. There's definitely effort being put here to create a certain air of mystery and mood around the series, and I love it. Each of these stories in this anthology function in a similar way and blend fear, paranoia, and obscene imagery into the JoJo universe without coming across as too foreign to fully integrate into part of the larger picture. If anything, exploring parts of the world that the JoJo lineage doesn't have a stake in, and meeting regular, ordinary people who get caught up in their own ghost stories, I think only adds to the mystique and appeal of the series as a whole, by fleshing out people and places that would have otherwise been ignored, particularly if the reasons you enjoy the series has to do with the world building and atmosphere that Araki creates. So, Netflix, at least for the time being, thank you for having brought us this series of episodes from 2017 to a streaming service here in the US in 2021, because even if it is a bit behind the times, learning more about the JoJo universe never ceases to disappoint. And amigos, if you haven't watched it, I highly recommend that you do. And if you have watched it, please let me know what you thought in the comment section down below. JoJo is always a wild ride, and Rohan's collection of stories was truly one for the books. And guys, that'll be the video. Please remember to like the video if you liked it, and subscribe if you want to see more stuff from me in the future. This is the 3rd video I've put out on this channel, the last 2 being my first on Sword Art Online and one on Jujutsu Kaisen, which is one I worked really hard on, talk about some of the lore behind the series. So if you haven't watched those, please check those out. They're both as long as this video is, if not maybe a little bit longer. And a little bit more research, less funny, and that kind of thing. So if you liked this, again, please let me know. This was trying to be more of a comical take, or like tried to write a funnier script and things. Just wanted to see how that went, and it was fun to do. And guys, if you're still sticking around, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Talk to me in the comments. Follow me on Twitter, blah, 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 blah. I'll see you guys later.